You check your phone before you walk outside. 98 degrees. You already know what to do. Air conditioning, cold water, maybe you wait until evening. It feels automatic, almost boring. But the real answer to how your ancestors survived without any of that is far stranger than a thermostat, and it's written directly into your body right now in ways you've never had a reason to notice. Because here's the strange part. You are, biologically speaking, one of the worst equipped mammals on Earth for surviving heat by brute strength. No thick fur to reflect the sun, no claws made for digging shade, no ability to pant like a dog to cool your blood. And yet somehow, humans didn't just survive the hottest deserts on the planet. They thrived there for tens of thousands of years, long before anyone had a word for engineering. So how does a soft, slow, thin-skinned primate outlast an environment that kills stronger animals in hours? The answer isn't one single trick. It's physiology, chemistry, and culture all stacked on top of each other, all solving the same impossible problem from different angles. And once you see how they fit together, you'll never look at a hot afternoon the same way again. Start with the body itself, because this is where the story gets genuinely strange. Around 2 million years ago, your ancestors began losing something almost every other mammal on the savanna still had: thick body hair. It sounds like a disadvantage. In direct sun, it should have been a death sentence. Instead, it became the single greatest heat survival tool in the entire animal kingdom. Bare skin let heat escape the body directly into the air instead of getting trapped in fur. And in place of that fur, your ancestors developed something almost no other large mammal has in comparable numbers: eccrine sweat glands, the kind that produce thin, watery sweat across nearly your entire body, not just your paws or your nose. You have somewhere between 2 and 4 million of them. A horse has a fraction of that. A dog has almost none outside its tongue and paw pads, which is exactly why panting, not sweating, is a dog's only real cooling system. Do you see the trade being made here? Every other desert mammal cools down through small, localized systems. Humans built an entire body around one massive, continuous radiator. That radiator, though, comes with a brutal cost, and this is where the chemistry enters the story. Sweat isn't just water leaving your body. It's carrying salt with it, and salt isn't optional. It's the mineral your nerves and muscles use to fire every single signal that keeps you upright and thinking clearly. Lose too much water, and you get thirsty. That part is obvious, almost instinctive. But lose too much salt without replacing it, and something far more dangerous starts happening quietly inside you. It's called hyponatremia, a fancy way of saying your blood's sodium levels have crashed. Confusion sets in first, then muscle cramps, then, in extreme cases, the brain itself starts to swell. Ancient desert dwellers didn't know the biochemistry, but they absolutely knew the pattern. Someone who drank water all day without eating or replacing salt could still collapse in the heat, sometimes worse than someone who drank almost nothing at all. This is exactly why nomadic desert cultures across the Sahara, the Arabian Peninsula, and the American Southwest treated salt as something close to sacred. Trade routes formed entirely around it. Cities rose and fell on salt commerce. The Tuareg people of the Sahara built centuries of their economy around camel caravans, hauling nothing but salt slabs across some of the hottest terrain on Earth, because everyone downstream of that trade understood something modern sports science only formalized a few decades ago. Water alone doesn't save you from heat. Balance does. Now here's where the story gets even stranger, because your ancestors didn't just adapt to survive the desert heat. At some point, they weaponized it. Around 2 million years ago, alongside the loss of body hair, something else was changing. Human legs were getting longer. Human joints were becoming built for one specific, exhausting motion. Sustained, long-distance running, not sprinting, endurance. And this mattered because almost every other animal on the savanna, no matter how fast, has a hidden weakness. They overheat quickly, and once they do, they have to stop and pant to cool down. A human doesn't have to stop. A human can sweat while still moving at a steady pace, hour after hour in the hottest part of the day, tracking an animal that has to keep pausing to cool off. This is called persistence hunting, and it sounds almost unbelievable the first time you hear it described. Hunters in the Kalahari Desert, among groups like the Sand People, have been documented doing exactly this into the modern era. They pick a kudu or an eland in the brutal midday heat, on purpose, when the animal's own cooling system is at its weakest, and they simply keep moving. No spears thrown from a distance, no traps, just relentless walking and jogging under a sun that would exhaust almost anything else on 4 legs until the animal's body temperature spikes so high it physically collapses. Think about that for a second. The heat that should have been the enemy became the weapon. Humans didn't just survive the hottest hours of the day. They learned that almost nothing else could keep up with them during those hours, and they turned that gap into dinner. But endurance and salt only solve part of the puzzle because raw heat exposure has a ceiling that biology alone can't push past. This is where behavior and timing enter the picture, and it's a pattern that shows up, almost word for word, across desert cultures that never had any contact with each other. Move during the cool hours. Rest during the brutal ones. Bedouin communities across the Arabian and Sahara deserts traditionally structured entire days around this, herding and traveling at dawn, dusk, and through the night, then retreating into shade or tents through the punishing middle hours of the afternoon. Aboriginal communities in the Australian outback followed strikingly similar rhythms, timing long-distance travel to the cooler edges of the day. Even architecture obeyed the same unspoken rule. Traditional Persian buildings used wind catchers, tall chimney-like structures designed to funnel any available breeze down into living spaces, cooling homes without a single moving part or a drop of electricity, some of them still standing and functioning after more than 1,000 years. Beneath the ground in Iran, ancient engineers built qanats, underground channels that carried water for miles from mountain aquifers to desert settlements, sheltered from direct sun the entire way so the water wouldn't evaporate before it arrived. None of these civilizations were in contact with each other. No shared blueprints, no shared language, no shared religion, and yet they converged again and again on the exact same solution. Don't fight the heat directly. Reroute your entire life around it. There's another adaptation hiding in plain sight, one you've probably never connected to desert survival at all: skin color. As your ancestors lost their body hair and exposed bare skin to direct, unfiltered sun for the first time, a new problem appeared almost immediately. Ultraviolet radiation doesn't just cause sunburn. It breaks down folate, a nutrient essential for healthy cell division and reproduction, and it does so quickly in intense sunlight. Populations that stayed in high UV regions near the equator, including many of the deserts already described, evolved higher concentrations of melanin, the pigment that gives skin its darker tone, specifically because it acts as a natural, built-in sunscreen. This wasn't cosmetic, it was a direct defense against a nutrient your ancestors' bodies couldn't function without. And it explains something that puzzled early European explorers crossing the Sahara and the deserts of the American Southwest. Indigenous desert populations weren't just more accustomed to the heat. Their bodies were, in a very literal sense, chemically shielded against a danger the explorers' own skin had no defense for at all. Do you see how none of these systems were working alone? Sweat cooled the body. Salt kept the nerves firing correctly. Melanin protected the cells doing the dividing. Every layer of the solution was solving a different piece of the same brutal equation, stacked on top of each other by evolution over hundreds of thousands of years, long before anyone understood what any of it was actually doing. History is full of proof of what happens when even one of these layers is missing. In 1845, explorer Charles Sturt led an expedition into the heart of the Australian outback, convinced he'd find a vast inland sea. Instead, he found some of the most punishing heat ever recorded, by a European expedition up to that point, and a group of men almost entirely unprepared for it, wearing heavy wool uniforms, drinking without replacing salt, resting at the wrong hours. Men on that expedition suffered scurvy, severe dehydration, and heat-related collapse, and the mission nearly ended in disaster, in a landscape Aboriginal communities had been living in comfortably for tens of thousands of years using almost none of the equipment Sturt's team carried. The desert hadn't changed. The knowledge simply hadn't transferred. That gap between a landscape that looks empty and hostile to an outsider and a landscape that's been fully understood by the people who belong to it is really the entire story here, playing out again and again across different continents and different centuries. Here's a question worth sitting with for a moment. If the human body is this well-engineered for heat, why does a desert still kill so easily? The answer is that the engineering has a hard limit, and once you cross it, none of your adaptations matter anymore. It's called hyperthermia, the medical term for what happens when your body's cooling system simply cannot keep up with the heat coming in. Past a certain core temperature, roughly 104 degrees Fahrenheit, your organs stop functioning correctly. Confusion sets in. Coordination fails. In severe cases, the brain begins to swell, not unlike the sodium crisis described earlier, except now it's temperature doing the damage instead of chemistry. This is exactly what killed unprepared travelers throughout history, and it's exactly why every surviving desert culture built such rigid, almost ritualistic rules around water, shade, and timing. It wasn't superstition. It was hard-earned data, passed down because the people who ignored it simply didn't survive to pass down anything at all. And this is where one of the strangest twists in the whole story shows up, because the modern intuition about desert survival is almost completely backwards. If you picture someone crossing the Sahara, you probably picture minimal clothing, skin exposed to catch whatever breeze exists. Bedouin tradition says the opposite. Layers of loose, flowing fabric, often covering nearly the entire body, including the head and neck. It sounds insane until you understand the mechanism underneath it. Loose fabric traps a thin layer of air against the skin, and that trapped air, combined with slow evaporating sweat, actually creates a personal microclimate cooler than the surrounding desert air. The fabric also blocks direct solar radiation from ever touching the skin in the first place, which matters enormously, because radiant heat from direct sun can be a bigger threat than air temperature itself. Camel riders crossing open desert in the height of summer weren't overheating in their robes. They were using them as portable shade, built into their clothing centuries before anyone coined the term passive cooling. Modern military and expedition researchers studying heat survival in extreme desert conditions have confirmed the same counterintuitive finding again and again. Covered skin, done correctly, regularly outperforms bare skin in dry desert heat. The instinct to strip down was never the answer. The instinct to wrap up correctly was. Salt, sweat, timing, clothing, architecture, none of it would have mattered without the one resource that made all of it possible in the first place: water. And ancient desert cultures didn't just find water, they developed an almost supernatural-seeming ability to read a landscape for it. Bedouin trackers could identify buried water sources by reading subtle shifts in vegetation, soil color, and even the flight patterns of birds at dawn and dusk, since many desert birds instinctively travel toward water sources at those exact hours. Indigenous Australian communities maintained detailed, multi-generational knowledge of soak locations, hidden underground water. Pockets accessible only if you knew precisely where and how deep to dig, knowledge passed down through oral storytelling that doubled as a survival map. The Nabateans, the ancient civilization behind the city of Petra, built an extraordinary network of cisterns, channels, and dams carved directly into desert rock, capturing and storing the rare, violent flash floods that swept through the region only a few times a year, effectively turning brief chaos into a year-round water supply. This wasn't luck, it was generations of observation compressed into practical engineering, built by people who understood that in the desert, the difference between a myth and a technology is usually just how many times it's been tested against death. So does any of this still apply to you, sitting comfortably far away from any actual desert? More than you'd think. That instinctive craving for salty food after a long, sweaty day isn't random. It's the same ancient chemistry that once dictated survival, still quietly running in the background of your body. The modern habit of resting during the hottest part of the afternoon, still practiced as siesta traditions across parts of Spain, Latin America, and the Mediterranean, is a direct cultural echo of the exact same dawn and dusk rhythm Bedouin herders and Aboriginal travelers followed thousands of years earlier. Even the loose, breathable linen clothing recommended for hot climates today traces its logic directly back to desert robes designed for the exact same airflow principle. Air conditioning didn't replace these ancient survival systems. It simply let you stop having to think about them consciously. The knowledge didn't disappear. It just went quiet, buried under a thermostat setting instead of a life or death decision. None of this was ever really about the desert. It was about a species that shouldn't have been able to survive extreme heat at all, built almost entirely wrong for the job on paper, that found a way anyway, not through brute strength but through sweat, salt, timing, and knowledge passed carefully from one generation to the next. Every surviving desert culture on Earth arrived at strikingly similar answers independently, because the desert itself was asking the same brutal question everywhere. Adapt or don't survive the afternoon. You still carry every piece of that answer inside you right now, in the salt you crave, in the shade you instinctively seek, in the sweat that starts before you've even noticed you're overheating. You don't check your phone before walking outside because the heat has changed. You check it because somewhere underneath the convenience, your body still remembers exactly how dangerous 98 degrees can be.